The ballroom shimmered with a flash of cameras and the facade of smiles, a night where appearances overshadowed reality. But when a cruel joke was made at Sandra Bullock's expense, the atmosphere shifted. She laughed politely, masking the hurt, and then Keanu Reeves stepped forward. His next move was subtle yet transformative. Before we delve deeper, let's take a moment to appreciate what makes Keanu Reeves so beloved. The Beverly Hills Hotel sparkled under the golden glow of March 2019, its elegant walls resonating with hushed conversations and calculated laughter. Tonight, the prestigious Golden Circle Awards were about to commence, an event so exclusive that only Hollywood's elite received invitations. Cameras captured every moment, reporters mingled discreetly, and stars showcased their brightest smiles. Yet, this was no ordinary night in Tinseltown. 3 lives were on a collision course that would redefine courage, dignity, and the essence of character in Hollywood. Sandra Bullock arrived at the main ballroom, radiant in a black silk gown, greeting colleagues with the genuine warmth that has made her universally adored. At 54, her career stands as a testament to raw talent. An Oscar winner, a box office queen, and most importantly, respected by peers and the public alike. She navigated the room with natural grace, pausing to share advice and stories with young directors, embodying the generosity that defines her. Across the elegant ballroom, Keanu Reeves entered quietly, as he always did. No drama, no unnecessary fanfare. At 54, he had evolved into more than a cinematic icon. He was regarded as Hollywood's last gentleman. Tales of his kindness circulated through the industry like urban legends. Subway rides with fans, generous tips for crew members, and never speaking ill of fellow actors. His presence was calm, observant, almost meditative. Little did anyone know that these two gentle souls would soon be linked by a moment that would resonate through Hollywood for years. Also present was Marcus Wellington, 52, one of the most powerful and ruthless studio executives on the West Coast. With perfectly styled silver hair and piercing blue eyes, Marcus had built his empire through calculated intimidation and the strategic dismantling of careers. He didn't just greenlight films. He controlled destinies, shaped careers, and crushed dreams with the ease of discarding yesterday's newspaper. Marcus epitomized the old guard of Hollywood, men who believed power granted them the right to humiliate anyone they deemed vulnerable. Known for his brutally honest feedback sessions, he left seasoned professionals questioning their worth, particularly actors he considered past their prime. The ceremony began like any other. Rehearsed jokes, predictable speeches, and the familiar atmosphere of superficial camaraderie that permeated these events. Celebrities feigned happiness at each other's successes while whispering malicious gossip during commercial breaks. Yet, tonight felt different, charged with a tension that transcended the usual competitiveness, as if the universe was preparing for a moment that would define not just 2 careers but the very soul of an entire industry. Sandra was animatedly chatting with a group of young filmmakers near the bar, sharing wisdom about navigating Hollywood with infectious enthusiasm. Her laughter creating a bubble of warmth amid the evening's falsity. Marcus watched from across the room, his eyes narrowing with predatory focus. He had an agenda, one that involved publicly reminding everyone of the natural order of Hollywood, where Sandra Bullock, successful and aging, represented everything he believed needed correction. Adjusting his expensive cufflinks like weapons, he quietly conspired with his assistant to set some people straight about their place in the industry. What Marcus didn't realize was that Keanu was observing from afar. When he witnessed injustice, he didn't merely watch. He acted. The evening continued with its familiar rhythms. Awards presented, speeches delivered, networking conducted with practiced precision. Yet, beneath the glamorous surface, tensions were building toward something unprecedented. As guests moved between conversations, 3 separate worlds were about to collide. Sandra's genuine kindness would be tested, Marcus's calculated cruelty would be exposed, and Keanu would show why some become legends, not for their achievements, but for who they choose to be when no one is watching. The stage was set for a confrontation that would challenge the very foundation of power in Hollywood. What began as a casual evening of celebration would evolve into a defining moment of moral courage. a reckoning years in the making. Tonight, a single conversation would reveal that sometimes the most crucial battles are fought not with violence or political maneuvering, but with unwavering dignity and moral clarity. Sometimes the most powerful response to cruelty is simply refusing to let it go unchallenged. As the night progressed, the atmosphere thickened, each conversation building toward an unpredictable climax. The beautiful ballroom, adorned with crystal chandeliers and marble floors, became a stage for something far more significant than any award ceremony. Among the designer tuxedos and perfect smiles, three distinct approaches to power and humanity were about to collide, forcing everyone present to examine their own moral courage and complicity in systems of abuse. Yet, as the evening unfolded and these three powerful figures moved closer to their inevitable confrontation, none realized they were about to partake in an event that would be remembered, analyzed, and discussed for years. What began as Marcus's calculated attempt to humiliate Sandra would transform into a moment that exposed Hollywood's toxic power structures, challenging everyone present to reflect on their moral courage and proving that sometimes one person's willingness to stand up can ignite a revolution. The ceremony reached its peak when Marcus Wellington decided to make his move. The timing had been meticulously planned. During the cocktail hour, when official cameras were momentarily paused, yet dozens of cell phones captured every interaction, Sandra was engrossed in animated conversation with three young filmmakers, sharing stories of her early career struggles with infectious enthusiasm. Her laughter echoing through the elegant space, creating ripples of genuine joy amid the sea of manufactured charm. It was precisely at this moment that Marcus approached, his expensive leather shoes clicking against the marble floor with deliberate precision. Sandra Bullock. His voice sliced through the conversation like a blade wrapped in false courtesy. His smile was cold, calculating, and utterly predatory. Well, still making the rounds, I see. Though I have to wonder. The group surrounding Sandra fell silent, as if the air had been sucked from the room. Curious gazes began to turn toward this unfolding scene. Sandra blinked, genuinely confused by the loaded comment and the aggressive undertone. "I'm sorry, Marcus, I don't understand what you mean." His laugh was harsh and dismissive, making several people physically uncomfortable. "Oh, Sandra, always so wonderfully oblivious. I'm talking about reality, sweetheart. About knowing when your time is up." The attack was surgical in its precision. Marcus had chosen the most vulnerable point of any aging actress in Hollywood, relevance and desirability, and transformed it into a weapon for maximum public humiliation. Each word was carefully selected to undermine her professional standing while maintaining a veneer of industry honesty. Sandra felt her face flush, not with embarrassment but with confusion and growing anger. "Marcus, I'm not sure what you're trying to." "What I'm trying to do," Marcus interrupted, his voice gaining volume to ensure nearby tables could hear, "is save you from further embarrassment. You're 54 years old, Sandra. Don't you think it's time to accept reality? To step aside for actresses who can actually sell tickets without nostalgia marketing?" Each word landed like a physical blow. This wasn't professional critique. It was calculated cruelty designed to destroy her confidence publicly, in front of peers who could determine her career's future. "The numbers don't lie," Marcus continued, circling closer like a predator who had found wounded prey. "Audiences want fresh faces, not has-beens desperately clinging to their glory days. You're becoming a liability to every project you touch." The young filmmakers around Sandra looked away uncomfortably, their admiration for her suddenly complicated by this public challenge to her worth. Nobody dared intervene. Marcus Wellington had the power to destroy careers with a single phone call, and everyone present knew it. Sandra's hands trembled slightly as she struggled to maintain her composure. "Marcus, I don't know why you feel the need to." "I feel the need," Marcus cut her off sharply, his voice dripping with condescension, "because someone has to tell you the truth. Everyone else is too polite to say it. Your time is over, Sandra. You can keep pretending you're still a leading lady, but everyone here knows you're yesterday's news, desperately trying to stay relevant." At that moment, Sandra realized she wasn't just being criticized. She was being systematically humiliated by one of Hollywood's most powerful men in front of colleagues who could make or break her future. Tears began to form in her eyes, but she fought desperately not to let them fall. She wouldn't give Marcus the satisfaction of seeing her break down publicly. The silence around them was deafening. Cell phones discreetly capturing every second of the humiliation. In a matter of hours, this would spread across every gossip site, every entertainment blog, every social media platform covering Hollywood drama. Marcus leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a cruel whisper that somehow carried to everyone nearby. "Face it, Sandra. You're nothing more than a relic trying to compete with women half your age. It's pathetic, really." Sandra opened her mouth to respond, but at that precise moment, a familiar voice cut through the tension like lightning splitting the darkness. "That's an interesting perspective, Marcus." As Sandra stood there, fighting back tears while struggling to maintain her dignity in front of Hollywood's elite, that calm, unmistakable voice changed everything in an instant. Keanu Reeves stepped forward with quiet authority, and the entire room seemed to hold its breath. Marcus's cruel smirk wavered for just a fraction of a second before returning full force. He had no idea he had just made the biggest miscalculation of his career. What Keanu said next would not only defend Sandra but also expose the toxic masculinity Marcus represented, beginning a reckoning that would echo through Hollywood for years. Keanu emerged from the crowd like a shadow gaining form, his movement fluid yet deliberate. There was no rush in his steps, only a quiet determination that made the entire ballroom freeze in collective anticipation. Marcus turned, and for a fraction of a second, his cruel expression faltered before hardening into defensive aggression. He straightened his shoulders like a bull preparing to charge, clearly not recognizing the gravity of the situation he had just created by attacking Sandra so publicly. "Keanu," Marcus said, his voice carrying that false bonhomie that barely concealed underlying hostility. "The saint of Hollywood graces us with his presence. I was just having a frank conversation with Sandra about market realities." Keanu stopped just a few meters from Marcus. His hands relaxed at his sides, but his dark, expressive eyes carried an intensity that made several people instinctively step back. "Frank." Keanu repeated the word slowly, as if examining it for hidden meanings and finding it contaminated. "That's an interesting way to describe public humiliation, Marcus, especially coming from someone who mistakes cruelty for honesty." The atmosphere in the salon changed instantaneously, as if someone had flipped an electrical switch, charging the air with possibility and danger. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. People moved closer, discreetly sensing they were about to witness something historic, something that would be talked about for years. Marcus laughed, but there was a forced note in his voice, a slight edge that betrayed his growing irritation. "Keanu, you always were too sensitive for this business. Perhaps you should stick to your action movies instead of inserting yourself in industry discussions that don't concern you." "Don't concern me." Keanu took a step forward, his voice, though still controlled, carried a weight that made the air feel thicker, more charged. "When someone I respect is being publicly degraded by someone who confuses power with the right to destroy others, that concerns me deeply." Sandra watched the scene unfold in stunned silence, still processing how quickly the situation had transformed. The tears in her eyes were now from a different emotion, not humiliation, but gratitude and something approaching hope for justice. Marcus, realizing he was losing control of the situation, decided to escalate the confrontation. His voice gained a sharp, aggressive edge. "Listen here, Keanu. You may have this ridiculous reputation as Hollywood's nice guy, but that doesn't give you the right to lecture me. I've built an empire in this city. I decide which careers survive and which don't. An empire." Keanu tilted his head slightly, that expression anyone who had ever watched his films would recognize. Calm on the surface but a storm brewing underneath. "Built on the destruction of how many careers, Marcus? How many talented people did you crush to feed your ego?" His words echoed through the ballroom like a judgment being pronounced. Everyone knew he had touched the very heart of the issue that nobody dared to address publicly. Marcus Wellington was feared precisely because his career was built on the systematic destruction of anyone he perceived as weak or vulnerable. "You're talking about something you don't understand," Marcus retorted. But his voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. "This is a competitive business. Not everyone can be a star forever. Competitive, yes. Sadistically cruel, no." Keanu stepped closer, his presence completely dominating the space around them. "There's a difference between professional assessment and personal destruction. What you did here tonight was pure sadism, designed to feed your own sense of superiority." Marcus looked around, expecting support from his usual circle of enablers, but found only uncomfortable stares. Some people had begun to discreetly distance themselves, not wanting to be associated with whatever was happening between these two powerful forces. "Sandra Bullock," Keanu continued, turning slightly to include her in the conversation while never losing focus on Marcus, "is one of the most talented, professional, and respected actresses this industry has ever known. She's earned her place through decades of hard work and genuine talent, things that apparently you're incapable of recognizing or respecting." Marcus felt his authority being challenged in a way he'd never experienced. He had completely underestimated Keanu's power, not financial or political power, but something far more dangerous. Genuine moral influence backed by universal respect. "You're making a serious mistake," Marcus said, and now there was a barely concealed threat in his voice. "I have connections throughout this industry. People who understand that sentiment doesn't run successful businesses. Cross me, and you'll find out just how quickly careers can end." At that moment, Keanu smiled. Not a friendly smile, but something far more dangerous. A smile that promised consequences Marcus hadn't considered. As Marcus realized, he had just threatened one of Hollywood's most beloved figures in front of dozens of witnesses. Something fundamental shifted in the room around them. The power structure he had spent years carefully constructing through intimidation began to crumble. Keanu's smile held secrets about Marcus's behavior that could destroy his empire, and he had just given him every reason to use them. What Marcus didn't know was that Keanu had been quietly documenting his pattern of abuse for years, waiting for exactly this moment. The reckoning he never saw coming was about to begin. For a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, Keanu simply observed Marcus with those dark eyes that had witnessed decades of Hollywood's hidden cruelties. His expression was unreadable, but anyone who knew him well could see the internal calculation happening behind his calm exterior, a careful weighing of justice against personal cost. Internally, Keanu wrestled with competing impulses. Part of him, the part that had learned to navigate Hollywood's treacherous waters by avoiding unnecessary conflicts, whispered caution. "Don't do this. Look away. You know what he's capable of. You've seen what happens to people who challenge him." But another voice, deeper and more insistent, carried the weight of every injustice he'd witnessed but stayed silent about. It was the voice that had grown stronger through personal loss, through watching good people destroyed by systems of cruelty, through all the moments when silence felt like complicity. "Not this time," he thought to himself. "Some things are more important than self-preservation." Sandra, watching the silent tension playing across Keanu's face, felt a mixture of hope and terror. She knew exactly what Marcus was capable of. His reputation for destroying careers wasn't just industry legend, it was documented fact. And now, Keanu was placing himself directly in the crosshairs of one of Hollywood's most vindictive power brokers for her sake. "Keanu," Sandra whispered gently, touching his arm. "You don't have to do this. I can handle him." But Keanu shook his head almost imperceptibly, his eyes never leaving Marcus's face, which now showed a mixture of irritation and growing unease. The predator was beginning to sense he might have cornered something more dangerous than he had anticipated. The crowd around them had grown larger. Executives, producers, actors, all sensing they were witnessing a moment that would be remembered and discussed for years. Cell phones were discreetly positioned to capture whatever was about to unfold, security cameras recording every angle. Marcus, recognizing he had an audience and feeling his control of the situation slipping, decided to make one final attempt to reassert dominance. You know, Keanu, I actually respect your protective instincts, but this isn't some movie where the hero saves the day. This is business, and in business, hard truths need to be spoken. Hard truths, Keanu repeated slowly, tasting the words like someone examining spoiled food. He took another step forward, close enough that his voice, though low and controlled, could be heard clearly by everyone around. You want to talk about hard truths, Marcus. Inside, Keanu was making a decision that he knew would change everything. Over the years, he had gathered information about Marcus, not through malicious investigation, but simply by being observant, by listening to stories shared in confidence, by witnessing behavior that revealed character. It was information he had kept private, hoping it would never be necessary to use. That hope had just died. The hard truth, Keanu continued, his voice gaining a quality that made even the waitstaff stop what they were doing to listen, is that you've built your career on the systematic destruction of people who couldn't fight back. The hard truth is that you mistake fear for respect and cruelty for strength. Marcus opened his mouth to respond, but Keanu raised a hand. The gesture was so naturally authoritative that Marcus instinctively fell silent, perhaps recognizing for the first time that he was facing someone who couldn't be intimidated or manipulated. The hard truth is that you've confused having power with being powerful. And the hardest truth of all, Keanu paused, letting the tension build until it was almost unbearable for everyone watching, is that your reign of terror is about to end. As those words hung in the air like a death sentence for his career, Marcus realized he wasn't just facing an angry actor. He was facing someone who knew things, dangerous things, that could end not just his career but expose a pattern of abuse he had spent years carefully hiding. The confident smirk faded completely from his face as he understood that Keanu Reeves wasn't just defending Sandra Bullock. He was declaring war on everything Marcus represented. And in Hollywood, when someone with Keanu's moral authority declares war, even the most powerful bullies should be very afraid. The moment of rupture arrived like thunder after lightning, inevitable, devastating, and impossible to ignore. Keanu had crossed the line from polite confrontation to dangerous revelation, and everyone in the ballroom could feel the shift in atmospheric pressure that preceded a storm. Marcus Wellington, for the first time in his powerful career, felt something he'd long forgotten, genuine,